first picked up the LOMO Lubitel 166B on eBay for £55, hoping to finally try out medium format for the first time. Arrived in pristine condition with no signs of real use, it's a Soviet 6x6 medium format camera and is a TLR, meaning twin lens reflex. It also has a waist level finder. It was first produced from 1980 to 1990 and sold just under 1 million units. You may recognise the brand name as they have since become lomography. It's an all plastic body other than the shutter, the aperture functions and the top metal flip out for the finder. So after shooting over 6 rolls in it over the winter holidays, what do I think of this camera? In terms of looks, despite being mostly plastic, I've actually grown to love the look of this camera. I find the Rolleiflex a bit garish, but I think the LOMO is a nice subtle box. Shooting with this camera certainly draws a bit of attention. Lots of people always like to see what I'm doing when I'm taking photographs anyway, but this definitely caught the extra eye on the street. Loading film on this camera is a bit tricky to get a hang of at first because you've got to put the film in and secure it in place with the clips either side on both the top and the bottom. But after a roll, I got used to loading it fairly quickly. The downside to loading film on this is the amount you have to wind the camera. At first I thought I had wound it too much, but it really does just take ages. In order to know which frame you're on and where to wind to, there is a red flip out panel which allows you to see the back of the film, which will show you the number you're on. Remember to close this or you may risk some bleed through though, although I left it open a few times by accident and my images came out fine. Some people have had issues with the back of the camera coming loose and opening, exposing their film. I didn't have this issue, but I can see why. It's just a tiny little pressure mount clip that holds it shut, and to be honest I did apply a little scotch tape on particularly important shoots just to be safe. This leads me on to my next point, which is probably mostly user error, but I've had a bunch of other people do this too, and it's double exposing. It's just so easy to forget whether you've shot the frame or not and to wind the camera. The shutter doesn't lock up, which is my usual way of checking. I double exposed a lot shooting this, but I finally managed to get the hang of it after figuring out a shooting pattern. In terms of the finder, it was my first time using a waist level finder, and on my first shoot I was super put off using it again because everything is backwards and it was a little bit stressful doing such a big shoot with it for the first time. But on my next shoot, it was just natural. The finder is pretty big and bright, even at night time. You can't really tell your focus from the finder itself, but there's a flip out magnifier in order for you to nail critical focus. Beware, this magnifier is a little flimsy, so be gentle with it. There was also a sports finder which is just a little cutout square, and the front folds down to a larger cutout square to also compose with. I only use this once, so I just don't trust framing this far away from the lens. In general, I always just had focus on infinity as it's not the greatest and most accurate way to focus. I shot everything at f8 or above. There are a few shots I did focus on and didn't have any trouble with stuff being out of focus. The images that came out of the camera from the cheapish lens design actually blew me away a little. A few images appeared a little soft despite again shooting at f8+, but I think I remember it drizzling a little bit and me wiping them with my jumper, so they're probably just a bit smeared. Some of the stuff when zooming in is actually surprisingly sharp. I wouldn't trust this lens really to go much lower in f-stops, just because there's a chance of missing focus, and it already being a bit soft than most cameras, it'll only increase this. This lens is 75mm, which is equivalent to around 41mm. It took me a bit of time getting used to the slightly wider field of view than my usual 55 on 35mm cameras, but I enjoyed focusing on getting much more in the frame. In terms of shutter speeds, there really isn't much choice. It goes from 1/15th to 1/250th, so you only really get 3 shutter speeds you can do handheld, but I didn't have any issue with it even when shooting in overcast conditions at f8 and over. But in lower light, you probably want to avoid shooting at a lower f-stop. You'll probably want to bring a tripod. The shutter speed itself is awkwardly placed. It does have a shutter release lever to make sure you don't hit it by accident though. For a lot of the shots during the day, I did sometimes use a shutter release cable, as it was sometimes a bit easier to shoot this way. Speaking of shutter release, the camera also has a bulb mode, which leads me on to my favourite thing about this camera, and that's night photography. This camera is nothing shy of a night photography beast. Everything about using this camera was fantastic on a tripod, and it looks awesome on one too. The results were brilliant. It produced super sharp, awesome looking images and was a breeze to use with a bright viewfinder and a lightweight body. I just carried it around on top of the tripod. Sure, you have to put it a bit lower if you wanted to look through the finder to get your framing, but you can also use a metal framing guide if you need something higher up, like I did for this shot. Going into shooting, I didn't really know if I liked 6x6, but after shooting this camera, it really holds a special place in my heart. Not just because of the square, but because this camera is so much fun to use. Sure, it's not that sharp and the lenses aren't the best, and the focus control isn't great. There's the occasional bit of vignetting and tendency for some images to look a bit toy camera-like, but I love the fact that this camera gives some photos a bit of character, and for the price, it's just unbeatable. I have a cheaper 6x6 camera which cost me £30 and technically has a better lens. It's a Zeiss contour but the 517-16 model, but there's no way of knowing your focus. You have to guess based on how many feet away your subject is. If you want one with a rangefinder though, which is what the Super contour is, it's going to cost you more than double than this. For anyone interested in getting into medium format either on the cheap or to try and see if they like it, this is the perfect little camera to get. I would even recommend it to some professionals who want to shoot the occasional 6x6 image. 6x6 isn't really a profitable format anyway, so it's definitely more for hobbyists than posting online, so the slightly lesser quality of the lenses on the camera really doesn't make all that difference. You will need to meter with an app or a spot meter for this camera, however. I recommend a spot meter for the most accurate results in order to protect your shadows, but I did do several shoots with my phone app and had great results. I've since bought myself a Pentax 645 so I can have my work in a format that's more likely to sell, but I don't think I'll be looking to get rid of this camera in a long time, and will definitely continue to shoot it, in particular for nighttime. I have a review coming out soon of the Pentax 645 as well as trying out that £30 medium format camera without knowing focus. I also do other videos where I document my journey shooting film stocks or just general film photography content. I hope you enjoyed the video. Any questions, please feel free to comment and please do subscribe. I'm a tiny little channel, so always appreciate any support. See you in the next one. Woohoo!